Marcy, Skylight, Gray, Cliff, and Redfield done. Now the long walk back to the lodge. 3:55 a.m., just signed in. Santanoni Range, let's go. The wind is whipping here in the Seward Range today. Just finished the Macomb slide and my legs are on fire. Well, I fell victim to the floating logs again. Made it to the top of East Dix. Peak number 3 of 5 for today here in the Dix Range. Avalanche Pass. On top of Rocky Peak Ridge. It's like a hurricane up here. Rain and wind here on Tabletop. Whiteface, number 6. Muddy day here on Street and Nye for number 7 and 8. Sunny and blue on Haystack. Algonquin, up in the clouds, number 18. Gothics, number 22. Panther, number 38. Allen, number 45. 7:12 a.m. Big Slide, Adirondack, 46er. You're listening to the 46 of 46 podcast. July 13th, 2018. Just 5 days after hitting the Dix Range, it was time for my first big solo hike. Dial, Nippletop, Blake, and Colvin. This trip would weigh in at 19 miles and 6,000 feet of elevation gain, another monster of a day. My plan for today was to park at St. Hubert's, walk down the lake road to the H.G. Leach Trail, up to Dial, then Nippletop, down the Elk Pass Trail, and decide on the day when passing the Colvin Trail from Elk Pass if I was up for adding Colvin and Blake to the day. This way, if I wasn't feeling it, I could just complete the loop back to the lake road and come back for Blake and Colvin on another day. However, I'm the type of hiker that doesn't want to come back and do the same first half of a trail over again if I'm already there, so in the back of my mind, I kind of knew I'd be bagging all 4 peaks today, and that's exactly what I did. So I parked my car at St. Hubert's parking lot in Keene Valley and began hiking at 4:30 a.m. 4:30 crew, always the way to go. I had my headlamp on and started walking down the dirt road towards the golf course. Josh told me what to look for and where to go to find the trailhead here, and I remember finding his directions very strange. Park at St. Hubert's lot, which is across the street from the giant Roaring Brook trailhead. Then you're going to walk down the dirt road past the golf course, and then take a left between the tennis courts. You can't miss it. Between the tennis courts? What? Turns out these directions are incredibly accurate. It was just strange to hear about tennis courts and a golf course when thinking about hiking remote Adirondack mountains. I do find it to be a unique vibe walking through the Ausable Club to get to these trails, but thankfully they allow it and make it possible for us to do so. I eventually came to the golf course and made my left between the tennis courts, and I saw the trailhead. The directions were correct. And I got to the trailhead and signed in, first person to sign in once again, and I went through the cool wooden gate to the lake road that I had seen so many photos of, and my day was underway. The day begins with the lake road, love it or hate it. If you hike the high peaks, you'll hike the lake road at least a couple of times. It's a dirt road that leads to many different trails up many different mountains. I planned my day around starting with Dial and the Leach Trail, so I was looking for that on the left and eventually came to the green square sign with white lettering reading H.G. Leach Trail to Dial and Nippletop. The night before, I decided I wanted to get into the woods as soon as possible and was going to save the long lake road walk for the end of the day. I figured by that point I will be fried and a no-brainer couple-mile walk down a dirt road at the end of the day would be better. As I was anxious about my first big solo hike, I felt that would be a better way to end. Despite Josh recommending me doing the loop backwards from how I did, I stuck with my original game plan and went on to the Leach Trail. Trekking poles out and ready to rock. This trail starts by going up Bear Den Mountain, not to be confused with the Bear Den Mountain next to Whiteface. Yes, there are many recycled named mountains in the Adirondacks. It's a windy trail in the woods, soft ground, but man, does it go up immediately. Right from the start, you begin climbing and gaining elevation very quickly. It'll certainly wake you up early in the morning. Grueling way to start the day, but that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted to get the climb underway as soon as possible. That way I felt like I was on the trail. I was going. Let's do this. First big solo hike. Let's get it going. The trail has some switchbacks and some constant climbing. It offers dirt trails and some cool slab climbs too that I found particularly enjoyable and very scenic. There's even one stretch of trail that I remember well is on a dirt portion of the trail and surrounded by cool and unique trees. One hiker told me they're aspen trees and that they're not often found in the Adirondacks because he knew exactly what I was talking about. I can't confirm if either of those statements are true, but that's what I was told. Take it for what it is. But regardless, you'll know when you're on that stretch of trails. It has a very unique feel to it. Kind of feels like something you'd see in Jurassic Park. There's definitely a few velociraptors lurking in those woods. Most of the trail up Dial and Nippletop felt that way to me, actually. The first views of the day came as you reached the top of Noonmark Shoulder, which is around when the sun came up. I had another sunny and blue sky, perfect Adirondack summer day, so the views were fantastic all day long. At this point, I passed a trail sign letting you know Bear Den is still about a mile away and Dial is 2.1 miles away, so I carried on. The trail dips down as you leave Noonmark Shoulder and goes back up to the wooden summit of Bear Den, which is marked by another trail sign stating Dial Mountain 1.3 miles and Nippletop 3.4 miles. These trails all day are DEC marked and maintained trails and are very well marked and maintained, so they're very easy to follow. Getting to Dial was quick and typical Adirondack woods hiking, very green and a mix of dirt and rocks on the trail. I made it to the Dial summit, which is an elevation of 4,020 feet, at 7 a.m. on the dot, 2.5 hours into the day. The summit is a lookout with fantastic views of the Great Range. So I dropped my pack and ate a quick sandwich and continued on the Leech Trail the 2 miles or so towards Nippletop. This portion of the hike, however, is pretty fast because while dropping into a col and back up, the majority of the elevation has already been gained now. The trip down Dial has some cool views throughout, which makes for a fun hike. Once in the col, about to start up Nippletop, I decided I needed some more fuel and grabbed a bag of M&Ms, which I forgot was already open, and I picked them up upside down and dumped all of them out into the mud. Awesome. I did pick them all up, though. Leave no trace. But they went into a Ziploc bag and eventually the garbage when I got home. The mud was a little too questionable to brush them off. Plus, they're just M&Ms, and I had a ton more. I pack a lot of food on the trail. So I made it up to the trail junction for Nippletop and Elk Pass. At this point, you take the left the final 0.2 miles to Nippletop Summit, which is semi-wooded but has great lookout spots to eat a sandwich and hang out for a while. I made it to the top at 8:15 a.m., so about an hour from Dial to Nippletop, which stands 4,620 feet for high peak number 15, the highest of the day. And then I ate another PB&J once I arrived at the summit. I tend to bring one PB&J or other sandwich per summit each day. So besides for snacks and shot blocks and goo and all that jazz, if I'm summiting 4 peaks, I typically bring 4 sandwiches. I never want to get hungry while I'm on the trail, so I eat before that point if possible to remain fueled and ready to rock for the day. Time to leave Nippletop, still no sign of human life on the day, and I headed the 0.2 miles back to the Elk Pass split that I had just passed. This was easily the most difficult part of the day in my opinion, going down Elk Pass because it is steep. Don't stub your nose caliber steep if you're coming up, but I was going down. Part of the reason I chose to take the loop this way instead of the other direction that Josh recommended was because I wanted to go down Elk Pass instead of up. It's definitely just as difficult physically going up or down, but in very different ways. So I slowly but surely started my descent down the 1 mile Elk Pass trail. Emphasis on slowly because it is slow going. Very technical. Towards the bottom I heard voices in the woods at a campsite, which was my first sign that I'm not the only human being on planet Earth anymore, and there are others amongst me. The bottom of Elk Pass brings you in between a couple of ponds, and knowing I'm off the Elk Pass descent made these ponds a very welcomed sight. Very calm and quiet part of the trail. Shortly after passing by, I passed my first couple of hikers for the day. 2 dudes in their 20s who, again, couldn't believe I had already summited Dial and Nippletop when I passed them. That's where they were headed for the day. After more walking and starting to get fed up with not being at the dang Colvin Trail, I finally came to the trail junction marking the end of Elk Pass, the Colvin Trail, and the Gill Brook Trail, which is the trail I would take back to the lake road. So I stopped for a few gulps of some Noon tablet water in my Nalgene bottle. A couple of groups of hikers passed me as they headed towards Nippletop, all of which asking me how steep it was. I think by my slight pause and eyes getting slightly bigger before answering, they all knew the steepness that awaited them. They all could feel it. Then as I was putting on my backpack and about to begin my trek up the Colvin Trail, as I was feeling good and I knew I wasn't going to pass up these 2 peaks today, another solo hiker came up, eyeballed the junction signs, and started up Colvin. Come on. Just as I was about to go. Okay, well, I guess I'm going to just stand here now for a couple minutes and let him have a head start, because it's the worst when you just pass someone and then feel like they're on your heels immediately or vice versa. So I gave him a few minutes and then I started. From this junction to Blake is 2.4 miles, so round trip to hit both peaks and get back to this junction is 4.8 miles, which to me at the time didn't seem all that bad, though I had yet to experience the cold between Blake and Colvin. I began hiking only to pass my solo hiker friend about 10 minutes into my trip up Colvin when he stopped to take some photos. Then 10 minutes later, he passed me again, as it was his first mountain of the day and he was a lot fresher than I was. Then the round robin continued and I passed him for the second time as he took more photos, only to be passed again by him a few minutes after. So at this point I decided to stop and chill for a few minutes and catch my breath, drive a Snickers bar into me, and end this whole back and forth we're doing. I'd eventually see him again up on Colvin and then on the way up Blake, so we obviously became best friends that day. Carrying on up the Colvin Trail, which is relatively steep, Lots of slab climbing and scrambling ends with a fun straight-up rock and root climb to get onto the summit, which is a big boulder clearing with fantastic views of the Great Range and Ausable Lake. I summited Colvin at 10:15 a.m. for my third peak of the day at just under 6 hours into my hike, number 16 of 46. The best summit of the day to stop for a nice lunch, in my opinion, with big open views standing 4,057 feet above sea level. The summit had about 6 people on it as I arrived, which made it full, but not too bad. Any more and it would have been way too crowded. I had great conversations with the other hikers on the summit, and after spending the whole morning solo, it was nice to engage in some human interaction. One hiker on the summit I met named Eli, I would coincidentally run into him again weeks later near Skylight, and then we would even go on to hike the Seward Range together and form an actual friendship. Trail friendships. But on this day, I was just meeting him for the first time, and we all went our separate ways, not knowing what the future entailed. While on the summit, everyone was talking about the number of high peaks they were at on their way to 46. Everyone else was in their 20s and 30s, which kind of bummed me out at the time, as I was only at 16. So far to go. But, plugging away little by little. Anyways, after my PB&J on Colvin and staying up there for a good 20 minutes, I started my 1.3-mile out-and-back hike over to Blake. I wasn't aware of how steep it is to Blake until the other hikers on Colvin told me. They were not kidding. Getting to the col means losing a ton of elevation and very quickly. Down, down, down. Very steep. Multiple wooden ladders that are godsends and potential injuries waiting to happen without them. So they're very nice to have. I made it to the col in 30 minutes where I passed another trail sign stating that Blake Peak was 0.5 miles up. This portion of the trail involves a lot of slab and root climbing as it's 0.5 miles straight up. It's certainly a physical challenge. And about 3/4 of the way up Blake, I passed a backpack on the trail, which is my Albany friend from before that I played round-robin tag with going up Colvin. He had dropped his pack to finish Blake in an easier fashion. It was the first time I heard of this sort of thing, dropping your packs on an out and back to make it lighter and quicker. Smart, but something I never ended up doing. Too nervous if something's going to happen to my backpack. And since this summer had so many bears and Sasquatch stealing people's packs, I always kept it on. Also, then I don't have the moment of putting my pack back on my super sweaty back, which I hate. So after lots of climbing, I made it the 0.5 miles to the summit of Blake, 3,960 feet, at 11:30 a.m., 7 hours into my day for high peak number 17 and 4 of 4 on the day. A wooden summit with no views, which is marked by a sign conveniently pointing you back to Colvin, as well as the ridge to Pinnacle. There's a reason so many people list Blake as their least favorite high peaks hike, and I get it. It took an hour over from Colvin and an hour back for a 2-hour round tripper once on Colvin. I quickly got down Blake to the col, where I passed my new Lake George friends Eli and Josh again, and then I hurried up the trail to Colvin. I felt like I was cruising at Mach speed on the way up. Once summiting Colvin again, I decided to have my final PB&J and fuel up for the hike out. This time on the summit, there were 3 guys and a girl enjoying lunch. She was very chatty with me, but the 3 guys all looked absolutely miserable and like they didn't want to be there. There was an odd tension on that summit that I probably walked into and cut. Hard to not enjoy being out there on a perfect summer day like it was. She was hiking the same route I did today, but was also thinking of adding Sawteeth to the mix as well. So she is much more hardcore than I, as I was very ready to be back at my car by this point, let alone adding another high peak to the mix. So I threw down a sandwich and headed back down Colvin, again in what felt like record time to that Gilbrook Trail junction. I was finally on the Gilbrook Trail, which would take me out to the lake road where I could zone out and relax, because once I make it to the lake road, I completed what will turn out to be my first big solo hike. I can see why the Gilbrook Trail is an option people like to go up, because it is a very gradual trail. Probably a great way to start the day. And it's got great views and pools of water along the river, many that I'd love to have swam in along the Gilbrook as well. I was semi-trail running at this portion of the trail, flying past trees and rocks and ducking and dodging and cruising. I was floating down the trail so gracefully. I felt like I was hovering over my own body, watching myself hike. That's a Step Brothers reference. Only to shortly after this moment come to a rock and step on it, rolling my ankle to the side and having one of those, "Oh no, did I just break my ankle?" moments. I stopped and looked around and slowly took a step, very slowly, as I put a little bit of weight on it, little bit of weight. Okay, we're walking, but thank God it was okay. Whoa, rolling an ankle would have been an awful ending to an otherwise awesome day. So at that point, I decided I needed to slow down and just get to the lake road. No more risks. I eventually hit the Gilbrook Cutoff Trail, which would put me further down the lake road, but I'd get there quicker, and I decided I'm going for it. Get me to the road. A few minutes later, I made it, came out to the dirt road known as the lake road, hated by Adirondack hikers everywhere, but man, was I glad to be there. At this point, I now had a roughly 3-mile walk back to